Good morning, Year 5. Hope you're all well. And I can't believe it's already Friday, the 15th of January, and the end of our second week. So we're looking at our Vipers again, and our final day of looking at A Vanishing of Griffins. I know the children in school have really enjoyed this book, and it might be one that we have to buy and have as a class read. So our Vipers that we're focusing on today is Explain. So looking forwards. So we're reading through here. So a reason closely related to a certain lever by one arm of the king's throne, a lever that when pulled opened up a large trapdoor right where the prisoners stood. Let's have a look at them, said the king. One of the pirate guards stepped forward and pulled a cloth bag off the first prisoner's head. A woman. Erna had seen her before, but for a moment he couldn't place where. She gave King Arpy a look of absolute contempt. Then Erna remembered where he'd seen her, and his stomach lurched in a way it hadn't lurched since his horrible sea journey. Ayla thought Erna, that was her name. She'd accompanied Patch and Wren back to Marwheel Abbey after their trip to see the witch Gemspar mountain. The trip had been a success. Wren, who had been cursed into the form of a rat, had been granted the ability to change back into her human shape, being just for short periods. He'd met Ayla only briefly. Then she had introduced herself as some kind of expert in magic, and had seemed very friendly with Patch and Wren. He turned his eyes to the second prisoner, who was quite a bit shorter than Ayla, and a terrible feeling washed over him. No, he thought, it can't be. The guard gripped the cloth bag covering the second prisoner's head and yanked. There, only 10 feet from Erna's cage, stood the whole reason that Erna was here at all. Patch Brightwater looking terrified, and Erna could make out a small, shifting bulge in the chest pocket of Patch's coat, which he strongly suspected was a certain rat-shaped friend. Erna had plenty of time to wonder how he would feel when he saw Patch again. Anger, perhaps, or even hatred. Now that moment had arrived, he felt no animosity at all. Well, what he felt was apprehension. If they had come to rescue him, they had made a terrible, terrible mistake. King Arpy cleared his throat. Pitiful prisoners, you're accused of being spies in the custody elite on account of you asking questions about my pet Piper. He thwacked Erna's cage with his staff. Do you confess? He grinned, and at that moment Erna knew that the king didn't care if they were spies. Not really. All he cared about was that other people would think it. Ayla's eyes narrowed as she spoke. We don't represent the custody elite, Your Majesty, she said. We're here to ask you to show mercy and release a friend. She nodded. Okay, so we're looking at Explain. So the sort of questions that we focus on Explain is why is it arranged like this? So what's the use of paragraphs? So remember the use of paragraph. Why have we got certain characters where they are? And what structures? What is the purpose? Is the effective use of, I don't know, for example, adjectives, character description, setting description effective? The mood of the character changes throughout the text. What shows this? What is the author's point of view? What effect does the description of pulling the bags off the head, for example, have on the audience? How does the author engage the reader? So it's very much leading through the events, okay, and it's moving it on. We haven't got description at every single point. It's moving it on through the action. Which section was most interesting, and how are the sections linked? So your questions, or your independent text, so you need to pause the video now and read through this independent text. Okay, so some of the words that we might have here that might confuse some of us as such might be yes, yes, blah, blah, yakety, yak. So it's kind of like when you're talking, you're not really listening, but you want to just make up what they're saying as such. We've got their sorcery. We know what sorcery is from our text in year 4. I think other than that, we know every single word of vocabulary throughout this. Okay, so then your questions here. So portrayed, explain why Erna is in shock. How does the author keep the reader engaged at the end of this extract, so the last paragraph? And what part of the extract was the most exciting and why? So 4 questions, so pause the video as well, or write down the questions, and then you can answer them by reading the text.